Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of ArtsBeat TV and radio here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer this morning, and we're chatting with Sean Harris, co-founder and director at Playhouse on Park in West Hartford, Connecticut, and they recently added the Connecticut Shakespeare Festival to their roster. Sean, it's great to have you on board this morning.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
You've done a lot of great stuff over the last decade in West Hartford, adding just another layer to our theatrical opportunities here. Your cohort, Tracy Flater, has been a guest here many times, but it's our first opportunity to chat. And I'm curious how you got involved with Playhouse on Park at the very beginning.
Oh, sure. So Darlene and I worked together. I used to run a high school theater program after I moved to Connecticut. I ran a high school theater program in West Hartford, and Darlene and I worked on a program called the Summer Arts Festival. And I talked about how I've always wanted to run a theater. And she said, I have a friend, Tracy, who we've been talking about running a theater. So then we started just talking and what would this look like? What would this be? What do we want it to be? And we were, Tracy might have told this to you before, but we were looking for theater spaces outside of West Hartford, like in Collinsville and different places. And then this theater kind of fell into our lap. So I've been with it, with the three of us have been talking and dreaming about this since around late 2008. And then we got the theater in June 2009.
And you've done such a varied things. You do comedy, you do drama, you have a resident dance company, you do musicals, but you don't do always the expected kind of thing. One of the productions that kind of surprised me and actually piqued my interest in Playhouse on Park was the fact that you took a Kander and Ebb musical, The Scottsboro Boys, which is very controversial, not particularly popular in the terms of people run out to see it, but you put that on stage alongside things like Santaland Diaries and Cabaret and the other kinds of stuff one might expect. So you've really kind of pushed the envelope a little bit.
Thank you. Our mission is to educate, entertain, and challenge. And we really want to try to do that in all three ways. And with challenge, it's challenging our audiences, but also challenging ourselves artistically. So if it's something that people have seen before, how can we not only just put our stamp on it, but really have the audiences experience it in a new way, and using our theater and the intimacy of the theater and the immersive quality of our theater? How can we really, so even a show like Into the Woods, which we just finished, it's still going on right now. How can people who have seen Into the Woods 100 times get a fresh approach on that? And then also that gives us especially as we were figuring out our identity, for so many years, what are the shows that we're really passionate about? And before Scottsboro Boys, there's a musical that we did called Passing Strange. I think we were the 5th regional theater to do Passing Strange. Never gets done. And that was a show that is like Darlene and Tracy's favorite show that they've ever seen. And then I started obsessing over it. And then we were like, oh my God, this has heart. This show needs to be done right now. And the same thing with Scottsboro Boys. We felt that there was a need for us to do it, but also that we became very passionate about it. And if we were passionate about it, then that's going to ripple into the audience, and I think into the production. So that's kind of its educate, entertain, and challenge. And then also that we need to be passionate about the show. And so that really determines what shows we end up doing.
And you actually, all of you segued to build a Shakespeare festival in addition to Playhouse on Park. How did that come to be?
It's something that I wanted to do for 25 years. And when I was in college, I I've done a couple Shakespeare festivals over the years as an actor. But my first foray was like when I was 21. I did the Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival, and I started. I did a couple others, and then I had friends that were running Shakespeare festivals. I've been out to Oregon a bunch of times, and I've been out to the Globe and different places. And I was like, I really want to figure out how to bring this. And once I moved to Connecticut, it was kind of like there's not a state Shakespeare festival. I didn't want to jump on the toes of the Greater Hartford Shakespeare Festival, which is Capitol Classics. You know, they're in Hartford. But we wanted to create our own like state Shakespeare festival. And so I had all of this vision for the entire, we were going to be outside this year. I don't know if you heard this whole drama, but it's like insane. We were going to be outside at a farm, at our farm in Bloomfield. And we had 3 stages, 5 productions in rep, a restaurant, a gift store, musicians, this whole crazy outdoor festival that I've been kind of dreaming up for years. And then they weren't allowed to do events there. They weren't zoned to do events, but that never kind of went into, and they've been doing events for years. And that kind of hit, kind of impacted us because we were told that we had to stop after we just loaded in the whole set and everything. So we pivoted, like we've been doing all year, into our theater space in West Hartford, in which we just did Midsummer and a Shakespeare for Kids. We've had a green show before the show. Our restaurant and our bookstore moved into the theater. We're doing Into the Woods and Snow White right now. So we put 5 shows kind of in this space, and we're doing it, and it's going very, very well.
Yeah, it's a feather in your cap for sure. It's funny because Tracy has been on the show several times, and she was one of the last people I got to chat with live in the studio before the pandemic started. And then we had a program where we chatted, and she thought, like everybody else, well, we'll just be dark for maybe 6 weeks or so, and things are going to come back. And you guys have just kind of emerged out of a really tough time, like every other theater around. But you've got a robust season planned for next year. What are some of the shows that you'll be doing fall, winter, and spring?
Sure. So yeah, we're really excited. This is season 13 coming up, and we're going to make it lucky 13. We're starting off in September. We're starting off at the end of September with this play called 2 Jews Walk into a War, which is by a playwright named Seth Rosen. And it is comedy and sounds like a comedy, right? But it also is really about faith. And it's about the 2 last remaining Jewish men in Afghanistan, based on a true story, and kind of in the remains of this synagogue. And it has an odd couple kind of feel to it. I mean, they bicker and fight, and it's very funny, and there's a vaudevillian kind of world to it. But it has some really good heart to it. That's how we're starting the season. We have 2 really great Broadway actors that are coming in, and it's really exciting to start our season with that play. And then for a main stage season, then we are doing a sequel to Pride and Prejudice. So our last show before the pandemic was Pride and Prejudice, and was extraordinarily successful for us. And so the sequel to Pride and Prejudice is written by Lauren Gunderson, who we did a play of hers a couple of years ago called The Revolutionists. And this is Miss Bennet, Christmas at Pemberley. And it takes place 2 years after the end of Pride and Prejudice, in which a lot of the characters that gather during Christmas time. Mary Bennet becomes a central figure in this, but Elizabeth Bennet is in it, and she's married to Darcy, and Jane is pregnant with Bingley, and it's all great fun. And that's a nice comedy, romantic comedy that's going to happen right around the holidays. Then in kind of this January, February slot, which is always like, what do we do during that time when, who knows what the weather's going to be like? And we really wanted to bring a fun musical. And we're going to do Five Guys Named Mo, which I don't know if you ever saw, but that's book written by Clark Peters from I know him from The Wire, but I also saw him in Iceman Cometh, and Louis Jordan does the music, and it's all like I don't want to call it a jukebox musical, but there is a lot of it is the hits of Louis Jordan, in which these five gentlemen kind of help this one guy find love as he's as a bachelor, and they pop out of the sound system and perform. So that's Five Guys Named Mo.
I saw that at the Bushnell. I got to say, long time ago when I first started arts reporting, and I knew nothing about the musical, knew nothing about the composer or anything like that. But I just remembered the audience was just jumping up and down with excitement during it.
It is definitely going to be a stomp your feet, stand up and fun. I mean, and that's one of the things about this theater. I love our theater space, and it's so great to be artistic director of a theater that you are obsessed with. But I talk about the immersive quality of the theater a lot, and how, you're in such a good proximity to the actors, and the actors are in such good proximity to the audience that there is this synergy that happens between them. And so I think that you will feel very involved in that show. Absolutely.
I mean, you just could not sit through that music. I mean, I when I hear it, there are a couple of radio stations that stream show tunes 24 hours a day that I happen to have on in the car when I drive. And when something from Five Guys Named Mo comes on, I got to be careful because my foot wants to tap the gas pedal. It's like Fat Swallers Ain't Misbehaving. It's just a feel-good musical.
So interestingly, that was we tried to get the rights for that show, and we weren't able to get the rights. We got the rights for Five Guys Named Mo last year, and then we got hit with we weren't able to stream it. So then it was like a really confusing thing. So we applied for Ain't Misbehaving and Five Guys Named Mo. I love Ain't Misbehaving too. Yeah, you're dancing along with that show, absolutely. The show after that is called The Agitators, and it's a story of Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass. It's written by a playwright named Matt Smart, and it's been being done in several regional theaters right now. It's a two-hander, and it's a really beautiful piece that is very theatrical. I mean, I think the danger of doing a piece that is kind of biographical is, so they had this relationship for 45 years. They had this friendship for 45 years that went through all of these, from the Rochester, New York, to the Civil War, to the heads of government, and we follow them along this journey, which is fascinating, but it is biographical, but it's not stuffy. It's very theatrical. It's a kind of a sensorial world with a lot of sound, a lot of projections, a lot of moving pieces. And I'm really excited. Kind of, how quick change farces are, in terms of people throwing on outfits and moving around and time period shifting. It has a lot of that fluidity to it. So I'm really excited to do a piece that I think is an educational piece, but it's very heightened theatrically. So it kind of fits what I was talking about, that education, entertain, and challenge, especially when you do a new play that I don't think has been done in Connecticut or Massachusetts yet. So That's exciting. And then we're closing the season with Pippin, which Pippin is a musical that Darlene, my partner, the other co-artistic director, it's her favorite show. It changed her life. It's her passion project. She's wanted to do it for years. We've tried to get the rights for the last, I think, 8 years. And we finally were able to get the rights for it because it's always been on a tour or something. But it really made her want to be a choreographer. And so we're working together like we do so often. But this is kind of her baby, and we're going to try to put our stamp on that. That's an interesting piece because you have the original production that was incredibly famous with Ben Vereen that was done a certain way. And then you have the Diane Paulus version that was done at ART and then on Broadway with the circus. And that's very, that also is very distinct. So what is going to be our stamp on it?
I
So
think
that's
it's certainly a show that can take a lot of different kinds of stamps. Yeah,
yes.
it's one of my favorite musicals too.
Oh, great.
So
Awesome.
I definitely will be there. And maybe more than once. It's something that it was one of the first shows that I saw, and I saw the original with Bob Fosse and.
Yeah.
The choreography and staging, which to me was so exciting. And then I saw the recent one that ART that moved on to New York with Diane Paulus. And it came to the Bushnell with Lucy Arnaz on a trapeze. What more can you ask for?
I didn't know that she was in it. I've seen her perform at 54 Below before. I love Lucy Arnaz.
Yeah. She was in it when the tour played the Bushnell on a cold and snowy night a couple of years ago, but it's a wonderful show, and it's certainly Stephen Schwartz, the composer, has done certainly well since Pippin with the blockbuster Wicked.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Darlene has her dance company, which I'm sure Tracy has said this, but we're one of the only theaters in the country that has a dance company in residence. And Stop Time Dance Theater is, they do remarkable shows every year. These are all conceived and choreographed and directed by Darlene. And we closed the theater in March, right as their show was in dress rehearsal. So we're going to actually be doing that show again. And it kind of takes place in a karaoke bar, and it's called Divas. And there's going to be some great music in it and some great dancing. So that's going to be in March of this coming year.
Now, this show, the Stop Time one, are they doing the one that they had started rehearsals for before, or has it been reconfigured and rethought out?
I think it's pretty much the same. I think there is, I think as they're rehearsing right now, they're starting to develop a little bit more and fine tuning and because they rehearse almost through the entire year, about once a week, and then they get into more intense rehearsals. And I think I have to ask Darlene about how much is going to change, but I know the core is going to be the same as it was going to be.
Okay, Sean, we're going to take a really quick break here to acknowledge the underwriters that make programming like ArtsBeat possible here on Westfield Community Programming, Channel 15, and 89.5 FM WSKB. While we do take that break, you can check out Playhouse on Park's upcoming season at playhouseonpark.org. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and we'll be right back.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org. Underwriting for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield, serving the youth of the Whip City and surrounding communities since 1969. For more information on the Great Futures Club for ages 3 to 5, happening weekdays, and the Club Teen Center for ages 11 and older, weekdays from 6:30 till 8 p.m., go online at bcgwestfield.org or visit the club at 28 West Silver Street. The Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield. Great futures start here.
Hi, it's Bob Plass, and I have Wow, It's Tuesday, every Tuesday, 6 to 8. Wow, it's Tuesday.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
I did it!
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to ArtsBeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. You're either watching us on Westfield Community Programming, Channel 15, or listening to us on 89.5 FM WSKB. Sean Harris from Playhouse on Park in West Hartford is here today. We're describing his upcoming season, which is really kind of exciting, eclectic mix of plays and musicals. Some of them are going to be familiar titles like Pippin, and some of them are going to be brand new to the area, like Two Jews Walk Into a War. Sean, where do you find your new plays?
I try to stay as I live in New York, and I try to stay as active as I can in terms of reading and watching, and also I have several friends that run some regional theaters, seeing what they're doing, seeing what plays really well. Like I found the Agitators because I have a friend who runs Riverside Theater out in Iowa, and then I have a friend of mine who was in it in Philadelphia. And I was like, and then I started exploring the show. I was like, they've been talking about it for the last year or so. So sometimes it's just like really trying to have your hand on the pulse of what is new and what's relevant. And I think that's one of the things that we're looking for. We don't want to do pieces that I don't want to say shouldn't be done now, but there's no reason to do them now. If we're going to try to be a progressive theater that also puts out relevant and accessible material, it's like we really want to think about, and that works in our space, and that still educates, entertains, and challenges. What are those pieces? So I'm constantly looking for pieces, and Darlene and myself need to agree. That's part of the other thing, is like if I'm really passionate about a piece and she hates it, because we have two different perspectives that really hit both of our audiences too, I think. And I kind of like that. I think sometimes theaters can get trapped by one person deciding what the season's going to be. And I kind of like that we can bounce ideas off of each other.
Yeah, well, you're one of the few arts organizations in the region where there's actually three people, the three co-founders, and three different visions that have to come together and agree. Where in a lot of cases you have a theater where it's one artistic director and his or her imprint completely on a season. I just can't imagine what it's like to be the fourth wall listening to the three of you debate and making choices because I know Tracy, but the three of you are very strong artistic personalities. So
thank you. Yeah, it is it's just like any family, there was definitely some tough years. And, when we were just like families, if there's financial problems in a family, woohoo, you know what I mean? Like there was definitely some rough, especially as we're trying to figure out who we are and how can we afford to do theater that we're really passionate about. So the emotional highs were so high, but the lows were so low. And I think it's taken a couple of years, but we really do respect each other and each other's and what each other brings to the table. And we're able to have really clear, heartfelt, empathetic listening conversations, in which we're really hearing each other and we're really able to know what's best for our organization.
What got you into theater initially? Do you remember the first play that you saw or the first theatrical experience that you had where you said, I got to do this?
So I grew up in New Jersey, and I did my little ugly duckling when I was 5 years old. But when I was 7, I started doing community theater, and I did Fiddler on the Roof, and I did South Pacific, and a couple other, and then I started doing that through high school. But in high school, I got a short little story. In high school, I did a play called Come Blow Your Horn in junior year in high school, and and we took it to some scenes to the State Thespian Festival, and I won. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I can do this. The fun thing about this story is my teacher, Wayne Diltz. I was going to see a show up in the Catskills, and there was a seat at this theater in the Catskills. There was a seat that said Wayne Diltz on it, like he might have contributed to get the seat or whatever in this theater. And I went to the artistic director, who I knew, and I said, "Do you know Wayne Diltz?" And he's like, "I don't know. Why don't you ask that guy over there?" And he was working concessions. My old acting teacher in the Catskills. I haven't seen this man in 20 years or so. I mean, it was like, I cried. He cried. It was beautiful.
Amazing.
But yeah, I started in high school, and then in college, I was an acting major, and then I went to grad school for acting as well.
So then you taught for a while in West Hartford. Now that you're an artistic director of a professional theater company, what kind of learning experience do you impart on your audiences? Are you hoping to give them a better appreciation of theater? Are you trying to entertain them? Do all of the above?
It's all of the above. I'll tell you what I don't want. I don't want a casual experience. I don't want anyone to leave the theater and be like, it was okay. I don't really care if they hate it, but I really believe if they have what I try to impart is that there is an emotional thread. Sometimes it's the heart of the piece, but there's really an emotional resonance that is very clear in your experience. And I don't know how often you've been to the theater, but what we try to do is as soon as people walk into the building, Darlene really kind of decorates the lobby, and we really try to immerse the audience as soon as they get into the play. So it's into the theater. So it becomes an event. So it becomes something that's not casual. And that's why I kind of like the intimacy of the space. Like I can zone out if I'm going to see a show in a 2,700 seat theater. I could be in those people in the back row. I don't know if they're getting the same experience as the people in the front row. And you're kind of removed a little bit in those big spaces. But here, there's an accountability. And if you are on your phone, you're texting, everybody in the theater is going to notice. If you start nodding off, somebody in the theater is going to notice. So it really holds the actors and the audience accountable. So it's almost impossible to leave casually. And that's what I try to, I teach now in New York. I teach privately, and I still teach, and I really believe in that. And a lot of it is that that theater and performances should be invigorating, and should be they should hit you in your core. You should not be a passive theater goer. I really don't believe in that. So that's something that I try to instill in the audiences all the time, but also in my students. This isn't casual work. It's there's definitely disconnected performances out there, disconnected theater out there. I really want to bring people in and feel connected.
That's great. Sean, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for joining me this morning. Can't wait to catch your new season indoors at Playhouse on Park. If you're interested in finding out, as you should be, what they're doing, playhouseonpark.org. We've been chatting with their artistic director and co-founder, Sean Harris. Good luck with your new season, Sean.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a break to acknowledge our underwriters, so we'll be back with more Art Speed. If you missed a part of today's program or want to watch it again or catch any of the other Art Speed programs we've done here over the last few years, you'll find them on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield. Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years. Specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays, 8 to 10.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to ArtSpeak TV and Radio, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're broadcasting live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy. And in the studio with me is Tim McKeever, who's known as a stand-up comic. He's been doing this all around New England. And I've never had a chance, Tim, to talk to a stand-up comic before. This is a debut for me, and I don't know how often you get to do radio and TV, but this could be like a major debut for both of us.
It kind of is. This is going to be a really good experience for both of us, I think.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm curious about is, how did you get into comedy?
So basically, I always used to when I grew up, I used to stay up late and I used to watch The Tonight Show, and they used to have comedians on all the time. That's really where I first got introduced to like the art of stand-up comedy and became interested in it. And it was really something that once I saw it, I was fascinated by it, and I always wanted to try and do it. So from that point on, maybe when I was like early teenagers, I just started jotting down ideas that I would have from time to time, just always imagining that at some point that I would do it, but didn't actually take that leap and get into it until much, much later.
Did you find when you started to do it that it was tough to stand up in front of a group of people and tell a joke?
I didn't actually find that it was tough to stand up in front of a group of people, because I was kind of comfortable doing that. But the amount of work that goes into writing stuff, and writing for a room, writing for a reaction is so much different than what I thought it would be. That experience I found to be tough. I originally started getting up by my mother had sent me an ad that they were having a comedy contest in downtown Springfield. This was a while back, and she sent me the ad, so I wrote an act to go do it. I hadn't workshopped the act. I didn't go to an open mic or anything like that. So that the first time getting up in front of a crowd and just trying to deliver stuff that I wrote basically in my head, that was the first time I realized, how much actually goes into taking the ideas that you generate and actually turning it into a joke that can make a room laugh.
And how do you actually script out a stand-up routine? If somebody says you're going to play the XYZ Club on Monday night, do you have a list of sketches or jokes or whatever planned in advance, or do you go with the flow of the audience?
It's a little bit of both of that. So there's a part of it is, if I anticipate where I'm going to be going, what I'm going to be doing, I have jokes that I know that I've written that work or I think might be good for that particular situation. So I'll write out a set list of basically where I think I want to go. But there's a certain part of it that's reading the room and seeing something that you might want to change or a different direction you might want to go in. I did a gig recently where I had an idea of where I was going to go. I showed up, I looked at the room, saw how people were interacting, and immediately realized, I thought I'd be able to go this way. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. They seemed like they'd be more into this kind of stuff. Maybe I'll try something different. So I have a rough idea of where I think I'm going to take them, but there's a lot of it that's done thinking on your feet when you're up there.
Now, like any other performer or actor or something, you spend a lot of time preparing what you're going to do and a lot of time doing it, but you also have to manage yourself and be your own agent and promoter and all of that to make things work. Before the pandemic and back then, before things changed, how many gigs could you do in the course of a year? And how did people find out, and how did you get those gigs?
Yeah, so prior to the pandemic, so essentially you want to have basically every weekend that you can be available, you want to have something booked. So basically you're always just looking at your calendar and basically trying to fill in holes. And prior to the pandemic, I was pretty much at the point where the days that or weekends or weekend maybe a Friday or Saturday that I wasn't working were days that I had something else going on or just legitimately couldn't work that day. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and just one by one, my calendar just started getting wiped out as people were closing up and just not comfortable, of course, because of the pandemic. So that was really tough for a lot of comedians. I mean, listen, I have a day job in addition to doing this, but there's a lot of comedians out there that do this as full-time work, and that the pandemic was just devastating to their income, not having any gigs or any way to do this besides maybe Zoom shows and things like that. It's a lot of hustling. It's a lot of reaching out to bookers, doing showcases, basically just being seen, being funny. You could go to an open mic where a booker might be there, or you get on a showcase, you do a guest spot at a club or a place where a booker is present and they see you and want to give you a chance, and then they start putting you to work, and based on what you do and your reputation, you basically start to get more and more work. Other comedians offer you opportunities and refer you for things, and that's basically how you get all these gigs to begin with.
With the pandemic and people starting to go back to restaurants and clubs and everything, has people's sense of humor changed? Do they laugh at things they didn't laugh at before? Are they more politically correct in their laughing? Or
I found that when I first started coming back, I found that people just generally seem to appreciate being out and being able to do something again. Not to say that it was easier when you were up there, but it genuinely seemed like people were there to have a good time and wanted to have a good time and weren't taking that for granted, and myself included in that. I mean, maybe that sets a different tone as well, but I was happy even when stuff was just starting to open up sporadically, and they were doing shows, but people were very spaced out. But just the opportunity for me to be able to get up and practice, stand up and shake off some of the rust that accumulates over time from not doing it, because it really is like muscle memory. You stop doing it and you start to lose it. You get in a groove when you're doing it regularly. So yeah, I found that audiences were very receptive to just having that as an opportunity to go out, be out of the house and hear something different.
Yeah, the only experience with comedy that I've ever had is on my day job when I do public relations and marketing.
Yeah.
I was the press rep for the Capitol Steps, which was the political satire group that had been around for about 38 years, mimicking and poking fun of both Republicans and Democrats from the time they formed in 1981 until they shuttered during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I found that, they would say, well, they always tried to play the middle of the road and not offend, be equal opportunity offenders. They'd poke fun at Republicans and Democrats and stuff. Now, I've worked with some of the members of the Steps since the troop folded as they're reemerging into new roles. And some of them say, what we could tell, the jokes that we could tell and the things we could poke fun of a couple of years ago, we can't right now because with the emergence of Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, things that you could snicker at a la Mel Brooks, a lot of times now you have to kind of backtrack a little bit because you don't want to be offensive in any way. Has that changed for your style of comedy?
I mean, it has and it hasn't. I mean, cancel culture in particular, it's a real thing, and I'll say that the things that I do, a lot of my material is I talk about myself, my life, things that I've experienced, and my perception of things. I don't consider myself to be very offensive, but maybe some people might find me offensive. I've certainly been on stage and told jokes that never draw any kind of oohs and ahs, and maybe one night it might, and that always takes me by surprise. But you never know. You never know with any audience what they're going to be into and what they're not going to be into. I mean, from what I do in comedy and what I see other people do, it's something where you can't. I can't go up there worried about if I do this joke, are people going to be offended by it? Can I say this? Can I say that? You have to have accountability to the stuff that you're saying. Like I said, I don't consider myself to be an offensive comic. I don't write jokes that are aimed to be offensive, but you never know what someone's experience with that is going to be.
In the world of comedy, can you take somebody else's joke or sketch and make it your own, or do you write specifically original work?
You write specifically original work. You can't take other people's stuff and turn it around and do it yourself. That's considered stealing.
Yeah, but the world of comedy stretches back from so far. Like a musician could say, "I'm going to take something from Tchaikovsky and the classical thing," or "I'm going to take Dave Brubeck from jazz," or "I'm going to take Gaga and Tony Bennett," and cover it, or make it their own. Can you go back to the world of Sid Caesar or Mel Brooks or some of the famous ones coming down the road and say, "I'm going to adapt that concept and idea to Tim McKeever"?
I mean, I suppose you could go mine Sid Caesar jokes and try to spin them into today's world. I don't know how successful you would be. I think that, every comedian's influenced by people that they saw when they were growing up, and some of those styles kind of integrate into what you end up doing. There's comedians that you can watch where you can see a little bit of influence of other comics in their stuff. That isn't stealing. That's like you're saying with music, different styles get incorporated and stuff. If you're actually using the jokes, the words, the language, then that property belongs to another comic. So you have to write your own original stuff.
And do you copyright your stuff? I mean, if I were a composer, I would be copywriting my music, or some of the work that I do in the arts I would copyright. Do you copyright your stuff?
I don't. No, I don't know too much about that, and I'm going to Google that as soon as we're done.
As soon as we take a commercial break.
Figure out how to make that happen. But no, it's something that happens. Like I've had experiences where I've done jokes or produced work or gone to shows or open mics and done jokes and seen them turn up somewhere else or have somebody else take credit for them. It's not a good experience, and it's definitely wrong. And usually what I'll do is just try to learn from that, and I'll just start working on something else. But it's an unfortunate part of the industry. It does happen. You can get your stuff taken.
Yeah, Joan Rivers once said on a comedy show, somebody asked her, and she said she kept a file cabinet with her jokes on it, and based upon whatever gig she was going to do, she made sure that certain jokes were included. She didn't tell the same joke to the same audience again and again. How do you keep track of your stuff?
I don't have a file cabinet, but I have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks, and I use the note application on my phone as well. And usually I just have a revolving list of things that work or are working for me right now, and those are usually the things that I'll draw from when I'm getting ready for a gig. Joan Rivers is a good example of basically like no good joke ever dies, right? And she would take something that she wrote about Princess Diana and repurpose it for someone from today's age, and so there's always that thing where I'll have a joke that maybe stops working for a little bit. So I might shelve it for a little while, and then maybe it becomes more relevant, or I figure out another angle on it and bring it back out of the shop and start working it again. So it's basically that's the method that I use. It's just a lot of notebooks and notes in my phone.
Who are some of the comics that have that you've watched or seen live in performance over the years that have influenced your work or that you've found particularly funny?
One of the biggest ones for me is Norm Macdonald. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
He used to be okay. He used
Yeah.
to be on Saturday Night Live. Infamously got fired from doing the Weekend Update. But his style is just super dry. And that's the kind of comedy that I've always been drawn to. I just like that, quick-witted, very dry kind of thing. Bill Burr, I've seen him live. He's a beast. He's top class. It doesn't get any better than that. He's just great. He's a great joke writer and a great performer as well. Those are some of my favorites. I mean, there's tons of them out there that I've loved at different points over the years.
Do you look more to the contemporary comics? Are there any of the classic ones that go back that if you say, who were the best comics or best American comics of all times? Do you go back? Is there a list of your tops?
Yeah, there's people that from way back in the day that I definitely admire, and that when I started getting into comedy more, I went back and listened to a lot of their stuff. Lenny Bruce is a huge one. I mean, comedy as it is doesn't exist today, and doesn't take the risks that it does without Lenny Bruce doing what he did. He really went from being just a joke writer in the more simple sense to being what you see today from people like Dave Chappelle, that go up and are just able to really take a stand on something and make statements. Lenny Bruce paid like the ultimate price for it at the time. People like that. I like really silly stuff like Bob Newhart's old stuff was really funny. Just things like that. I used to watch a lot of like British comedies too, like talk about like dry kind of humor. There's their comedy is really, really based in that. And things like that were the things that really influenced me.
Are you ever asked to write material for other people, or do you just write for yourself?
I've written stuff for other people too. It's helped people write material as well. I mean, it's generally, we'll sit down and with another comedian and just workshop ideas. It's kind of like a give and take kind of process. I could have a bit that I'm stuck on and have tried to work out for a while and aren't going anywhere. So I might bring it to another comic as well and say, listen, I don't know where else to go with this. And they might be able to give you a tag or an idea that pushes it in one direction or another. And I have other comics that I have that kind of relationship with that they can come to me and we'll work some stuff out as well.
Because I've worked with people that are speechwriters or, away from the arts. I've worked with somebody who's writing a speech or teaching a CEO or a marketing person to make a better presentation. And they always say, lighten it up, give it some humor. And then they look at you, well, where do I find somebody to do it? And then somebody says, well, you talk to a comic because they'll give you a joke to kind of get the audience pay attention or something like that. So I didn't know whether you and your colleagues will go out there and punch up somebody's speech or something like that, because there are people like Joe Biden that are out there that could sure use a laugh line here or there.
I hear that. I love writing. Like the writing portion of it for me is really enjoyable. So if President Biden wants to hit me up and if he needs a couple lines, I'd be happy to write a few things for him. But yeah,
I'm sure not only him, but there's a whole bunch of other political people that could sure use a laugh writer here and there. Some of them are just too intense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're probably afraid to even step into that territory right now.
So if people want to go see good stand-up, where around Western Massachusetts or Northern Connecticut can they go?
There's lots of places they could go. There's a comedy club at MGM. Called Roar, that gets in good comedians. There's, listen, there's there's bookers around the area that put on shows. Like some happen in bars, some happen in like legit comedy clubs and stuff like that. Like typically, if you see if you see a flyer for a comedy show and they're charging for a ticket, that usually means that they're paying their talent, so they're bringing in some people that are worthwhile and seeing. So I don't want to say that you have to exclusively go to clubs to see a good show, because you don't. There's shows that go on all over the place all the time, but typically if you just look into it a little and just see, okay, there's a price to get into this, there's a headliner that's coming in, might have a couple of credentials or something, you usually can count on seeing a good show.
Is there any agency that protects comics, like in theater? Actors Equity makes sure that their working conditions are appropriate, that post-COVID, that health restrictions are in place, that they get paid the right amount of money, that backstage is safe and all of that. Is there any agency or collective that protects you as a comic when you go on stage?
If there is, I'm not aware of it. So that's another thing for me to Google after the show. But no, there really is. I mean, you're basically looking at bookers, right? So they're the people that are putting on the shows. There's different bookers that I'll work for that during COVID, they knew the restrictions that needed to happen, how far away the comedian had to be from the stage. Some of them would have multiple microphones and stuff like that. So these are the people that are really looking out for the comedians and making sure that they get paid what they're being offered, and that it's a safe environment, and that just the setup in general is good. But there's definitely been, I've been on shows that either this prior to COVID and during COVID, where the setup hasn't been good, or the room's not good and stuff like that. It happens. It's the nature of the business. I say, like, you could go from having a fantastic, very good organized show, and you perform and you feel on top of the world, and then you could be booked the next night and it could be the exact opposite, and you just feel like trash afterwards. So there's some extremes in that, as far as the setup and how things are handled, but it basically differs from booker to booker and venue to venue.
I would assume that as a comic, it's really essential that you perform live in front of an audience, because the give and take of the audience responding to your jokes either takes you from here and brings you up to here, or drops you down.
Yeah.
Do you have the opportunity to do TV or video things? Do you ever go in that direction, or do you stick to the live stuff?
I stick to the live stuff. When COVID happened, I had the opportunity to do some things over Zoom, and some comics did that, and that's great. For me, it just was. I mean, that give and take that you're talking about, that's really what I thrive on. That's when I'm performing. That's where I get the energy from, and it's one of the reasons I'm interested in stand-up as an art form in general. So for me, I just didn't really feel like that would be the same thing, and not to knock you, because I didn't even try it, but for me, my emphasis was to be able to get back on an actual stage and be in front of a live crowd and do it that way.
So over the course of the next month or so, how many shows do you have lined up?
So I have so this weekend I'm in New Hampshire, working for Headliners Comedy Club. Then at the last weekend of the month, I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, at the Comedy Connection for Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then I have some things lined up in September. I can't think off the top of my head, but yeah, it's usually, like, I try for every single weekend if I can.
How can people find out your schedule? Do you have a website or social media?
I don't have a website. I'm on social media, though. That's how people can find out.
Okay. We're out of time, but I'm so glad you came in and chatted. It was a debut for me, and maybe for you as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never had a chance to ask a stand-up comic about what they do and how they do it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on to do that.
Tim McKeever, thanks for being here. And that wraps up another edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio. If you missed a part of this, want to catch it again, it's on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. Follow Tim McKeever on Facebook,
Tim McKeever on Facebook.
Tim McKeever on Facebook. And we'll be back next week with another Artsbeat. Thanks for joining us. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. We'll see you next Friday at 8 o'clock.
Daddy, you didn't say nothing about my dress. Don't you just love it? From now on, I will only attire myself in white. White, white, white. I keep thinking springtime. I keep looking ahead where the snow lies now. Someday, baby, there'll be a flower bed. Don't give up on next time. Just 'cause this time we're low, sure as skies are high. Someday, baby, up we'll go. With a one-step, baby, one baby step at a time. We'll run after our dreams. We may stop and start, but cross my heart, it will come true. That's what dreams do. We'll find the promise of a lifetime. Just find promise in me. Not tomorrow, but someday, baby, we'll live happily.
Someday, baby.
Someday, baby, happy is how we'll be. If they're gonna get much happier, we'll have to throw water on 'em. I ain't never felt much crappier. Nothing much we can do is God punishing me or you. I keep thinking springtime. I'd rather be boiled in oil. Looking ahead. I'd rather be dipped in slime. I'd rather be a flower strapped to a railroad tie. I'd rather be stuck in church. 'Cause this time we're low. I'd rather be trapped in fire. I'd rather be rolled up inside barbed wire. Baby keeps scooting his rear. He keeps letting her steer. Fun and sunshine will come true. And while they spread good cheer, that's what dreams do. We could be dead back here. The promise of a life. I'd rather be shipped by train. Promise in me. I'd rather be used to build, but oh no, they get to be fools while
Someday,
here we
baby.
sit someday.